Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the barn. As you can see, I now have a microphone in my face. I'll be using that a little bit more. And I had to make a review for the film we're going to talk about today because I just loved it so much. It'll be an interesting autumn season this 2022 because we have three back to back classic style murder mysteries coming out. And I, for one, am really interested in all of them, and I hope to see all of them. And I also think that we're getting off to a great start with this first entry into this unofficial trilogy. See how they run. Now, as soon as I saw trailers for this one, I knew I wanted to check it out, if only because I love Sam Rockwell and I really like Saoirse Ronan. They just might be my favorite two actors right now, and I really just I love them in everything. And they didn't disappoint in this movie. I think it was inspired casting all around, especially since this film didn't do what a lot of whodunits do. I mean, I don't mind this trope so much, like in Knives Out, it really works well. But what I'm saying is in this movie, they didn't really pump the cast list full of A-listers. I mean, there are some recognizable names here and there, but by and large, it was just the two leads that had the star power draw, and I mean, it was enough to get me in, so I think it really worked. So let's get into it. First thing that needs to be addressed about this film, as a whodunit, is that it is subversive, but in name only. Now, I didn't have a problem with this at all because I, for one, don't mind a genre film like mysteries sticking to a regular formula, just as long as the story and the characters and the overall mystery plot is sufficiently engaging. The catch for this film is that generally I disapprove of a movie that pretends to be subversive, by pointing out and poking fun at the tropes of the genre, but then chugging along with those tropes anyhow. Yet, perhaps even more important than its identity as a mystery is this film's identity as a quirky buddy comedy. This comedic angle that it takes is shown quite clearly from the very beginning, as the film opens with some glib commentary from the victim, played with delightfully reckless abandon by Adrian Brody, it's good to see him, about how all the whodunits are just the same. The unlikable one always gets killed first. The world-weary detective comes in and interrogates the suspects, and improbably at the end, all of them come together when the detective explains how he found the culprit. Yes, all of this ends up happening, but not in a way that bespeaks dull inevitability. This film is crackling with sharp pokes at its own genre, but it does it deftly and cheekily enough to emerge all the more enjoyable for it. There are some examples of self-awareness that I personally found a bit too blatant, such as a murder taking place at the same time as a murder is taking place in the Christie play that's on the stage, as well as a rather cheap gag about cutting to 3 weeks later. But the height of the film's self-awareness, I think, is the very fact that it is centered around an Agatha Christie play. The irony of it becomes a bit too much, but on the whole, it's handled with sufficient wit and tact. As to the motivations of the side suspect characters, they're pretty standard, but I think the writer must have realized that most of these characters, the ones who present themselves as the top suspects at the very beginning, are written off by the audience almost at once. I know I, for one, wrote them all off. And I suppose the Hollywood theater setting, with those big egos and scandals with all the characters, was a good choice for the differing motivations for the murder, but what really appealed to me about the setting, beside the automatic charms of the period, was the inclusion of Richard and Sheila Attenborough, and even, a mild spoiler on this point, Agatha Christie herself. There was something quite delightful at having these real-life, very famous people just casually inserted as just another member of this ensemble cast. That's just a little thing in movies I personally enjoy. As to whether the film stands on its own as a decent mystery, I'll say that it's all right. The one who did it I won't spoil, but this person had pretty good motivations that were reinforced throughout the film, just enough to be not conspicuous, but also pretty convincing. The flaw I feel with the villain is their plan. The first murder in particular didn't seem too warranted once you knew who did it and why, and the way they bring everyone together at the end seemed kind of forced. The killer is, though, sufficiently foreboding in the tenser scenes, but the real value of the film is how it smoothly weaves comedy into even its tensest moments. A particular favorite of mine is the tea scene at the end. I knew where that one was going. And it keeps the tone light enough so that the humor is never jarring. I'll end with 4 examples of how the humorous approach to the common tropes of the mystery genre made this film such a standout delight for me. Firstly, the inclusion of the washed-up detective was made infinitely more interesting and more fresh by the inclusion of a fresh and overenthusiastic new recruit. Has this been done before? Almost certainly. I can't think of where, but I'm positive it has. But it was given a decidedly unique and highly enjoyable spin by the 2 great actors with quite very good chemistry and charm. Second, and this one's just a thing I found amusing personally, I love how Agatha Christie just joins in the mystery with guns blazing. It struck me as quite funny that such a famous mystery writer would be so gung-ho about getting her hands dirty to play her part at the end of the mystery. And third is about the customary middle-of-the-story twist that turns out to be a dud. I love how they alluded to the twist in the interview with the usher toward the beginning, and that allusion was played for laughs, yet then turned on its head and made into a primary reason for the red herring's believability. And the last, and I think most important element that really tied this movie together and really speaks to its cleverness in subverting the genre was the ending, and how it doesn't quite hit you what's going on until finally you realize all that has happened and how they threw out how it was going to end quite early on. And I won't say any more. I really don't want to spoil it. And perhaps this setup will hit other people as too blatant to be clever and funny, but I thought it was just the hilarious twist this farcical mystery needed to cap off its story. Also, the ending, where Sam Rockwell talks to the camera, is a delight. It made me feel as if I was in on the secret of this charming, funny, witty, and twisty good time of a film.